The year was 1982. It was the fourth week in March, and we had some exciting things going on this week in the 80s. My name is Paul. I am your host here on This Week in the 80s. Let's take a look at what we've got in store for us today. We're going back to 1982. In the movies, Pee Wee Morris took on Henry Fonda. In music, video games entered the top 10 as Bucker and Garcia's Pac Man Fever took over the nation. Jerry Buckner is here today to talk about that amazing time when you had a pocket full of quarters and you were headed to the arcade. Over on the airwaves, we had Superheroes Without Instructions. Heather Thomas was hanging out with the Bionic Man and the Carringtons. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be alerted every time a new video starts. Thanks for stopping by today. Let's get started with television. On television, the last week of March 1982, the 8 p.m. slot had three very different types of shows on a Wednesday night. ABC had I Can't Believe It Myself. Suddenly the show was on top of the world. It could have been somebody, yep, you guessed it, The Greatest American Hero. For some reason, we just love that show. It's still pretty good. You can find it online. NBC had a sort of reality show called Real People. That went on for 90 minutes. They'd have people on doing weird or cool things, and then they'd talk to them about it. Riveting stuff. CBS, as you could probably expect, bombed. Remember Herbie, that awesome Disney Volkswagen? Yeah, they made a show about him. 6 episodes later, they stopped making the show about him. Terrible show. Nobody watched it. At the 9 o'clock spot, ABC kept rolling with The Fall Guy. Heather Thomas hanging out with Colt Seaver. Remember the Bionic Man? CBS redeemed itself with WKRP. And at the 9:30 slot, NBC showed Mrs. Garrett and the Girls, The Facts of Life. Seriously, Joe or Blair? Like, that's a debate that's been going on since the first episode and will probably go on forever. If you have the time, let me know in the comments, Joe or Blair? CBS, of course, fell back on its face with Baker's Dozen. Don't worry if you don't remember Baker's Dozen. It was only on for about 6 episodes. The 10 p.m. spot gave us more glory from CBS. It was season 1, episode 6 of Shannon. Season 1, episode 9 of Shannon would be its last. You can't blame them for not putting something great on, though. NBC was doing pretty well with Quincy MD and Jack Klugman, and ABC was ruling the airways with Dynasty. It's a long list of great shows, but, you know, honestly, I got to say, The Greatest American Hero, the best of them all at that time. In the movies, we had a duel for the box office dollars. The battle was between a wholesome story of rebuilding a strained family relationship on a pond in New England and Porky's. Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn had spent a total of 9 weeks at number 1. The weekend before this one, and this one was taken by Porky's. Pee Wee, Meat, Lassie, and Ballbricker ruling the box office. Coming in third was Richard Pryor's Live on the Sunset Strip. Imagine that. Go to the movies to see a stand-up show. That just doesn't happen anymore. Quest for Fire, Ron Perlman, Chariots of Fire, Absence of Malice, Victor Victoria were also in the top 10. You know, when I was a kid, we went to the movies all the time. In 1982, the last week of March 1982, I was 8. And I remember going to On Golden Pond and Chariots of Fire. I'm not really sure what my parents thought I was going to get out of seeing either one of those, because an 8-year-old was bored out of his pants at both of these. But in hindsight, looking at them now, Chariots of Fire is a super, super amazing show. And On Golden Pond is still for old people, despite the fact that I'll beat one soon. The top 10 in the last week of March 1982 had some interesting characteristics. It wasn't yet full-blown 80s, but it was still showing some 70s influence. Joan Jett, Journey, and the GoGos were 1, 2, 3 with I Love Rock and Roll, Open Arms, and We Got the Beat. But 4, 5, and 6 was Stevie Wonder, Air Supply, and Olivia Newton-John. The Girl, Sweet Dreams, and Make a Move on Me had lots of airplay. Listen, honestly, what was up with Air Supply? Like, I listened to some of their music recently just to refamiliarize myself with it. And at one point, they talk about rocking stadiums and all this stuff. It's like, those guys were soft as butter. Anyway, number 7 and number 10 on the top 10 were occupied by the same band, Jay Giels, with Centerfold and Freeze Frame. The number 8 was from previously mentioned Chariots of Fire. That piano instrumental was number 8 on the Hot 100 for the week. Imagine driving down the expressway, you're doing 65, you get the radios down, People are in the car, you're singing along, and all of a sudden, Chariots of Fire comes on and someone yells, "Turn it up." It was a weird time. Weird time. Well, what wasn't weird, though, was the song that was at number 9. But instead of having me tell you about it, let's have the co-writer tell you about it instead. From Buckner and Garcia, ladies and gentlemen, Jerry Buckner has come to talk about Pac Man Fever. Jerry, happy to have you on.
I'm glad to be on the show, Paul. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's one of those songs that have been with us. They've been with us since most of us can remember. Pac Man Fever took over the country, and there's only one song that goes along with it. There's only one tune that encapsulates the entire video game era of the late 70s, early 80s, of course, and that was Buckner and Garcia's Pac Man Fever. Now, Jerry, you started out.
I was just going to say that, what you say, they actually are, some people call it the anthem of the 80s for 80s video games. But I think the opening line, "I got a pocket full of quarters, I'm headed to the arcade." I think that said the whole thing about the song, and I think it said everything about that era. And,
I completely agree. That's exactly what we were doing.
It was a great line, Gary. It was Gary's lines. We wrote the song together, but it was a great opening line, and it's been used a million times in articles on various articles and documentaries and so forth. But yeah, you're right about it. Was crazy. It was a crazy time when it came out.
I think that's fantastic. And so you and Gary started out as friends, and you were writing jingles, correct? It was so you were writing jingles for Stone Mountain Ford and local restaurants. And then what happened next?
Well, we grew up in the same hometown of Akron, Ohio, and we met in junior high school and played in different bands throughout high school. When we got out of high school, we ended up partnering up, and again, we had a few different bands. And eventually I came to Atlanta to a friend had an opening in a band down here. And I came down because the money was good. And I thought, and there was a lot of stuff going on in Atlanta, and Gary followed shortly after. And so that's when we got into doing, we were playing in bands, and then we were also doing jingles in the daytime and trying to build up that jingle business. And that's actually how Pac-Man came about, and really the reason behind it.
So you guys were hanging out, you're writing the jingles. This is the late 70s, right?
Well, yes. Late 70s and then into the early 80s. Yeah.
Early 80s. And then you were hanging out where you had a pizza shop, and some people were playing, you guys were playing, and one of you thought, you know what? That's the vehicle that we need. That's what we should do. Let's write a song about video games.
Well, kind of. It wasn't a pizza shop. It was a restaurant in a place called, it was a city nearby Atlanta, Marietta, Georgia, and they have a big square up there and a lot of restaurants and antique stores. Anyway, we were working in a studio close to that area, working on a commercial project, and we took a break to come to dinner. We came up to the restaurant and went in there, and there was this machine sitting in the middle of the room, and people were playing it, and we're eating and we're watching, like, what's going on here? So eventually we were able to get on the machine and play it. Well, we got, we were hooked like everybody else. So we were working on this project for a few days. So we started coming in there every night, not so much to eat, but to play Pac-Man. And so the idea at the time was, I said, Gary, I wonder if we should do like some kind of little song on this thing to help our jingle business. Maybe we can get a local radio station to play it, or, that was the original idea behind it, was to build the jingle business. We had no idea in our minds that this could possibly be a regular record and be a worldwide hit like it was, at least initially. I mean, that was the idea behind it. Of course, as we got into the project and as time went along, and then when we got in the studio, we began to see that, that could be more of a, but even then, I wasn't sure that it could be a hit. Gary always said that he knew it was from day one. So,
Well, I'm sure most musicians, you've got a repertoire of 1,000 songs that you've written. Each one of them starts with the first note, hoping it's going to be the big hit, but never actually expecting it to be. And then all of a sudden, here you come along with the pocket full of quarters and headed off to the arcade. And then a short while later, you're on Springsteen's label.
Columbia Records. Yeah, Columbia. We what happened is our Arnie Geller, a dear friend and was our manager. He passed away just a year or so ago. But Arnie was with BGO Music, which had the Atlanta Rhythm section, Alicia Bridges, some other acts, and we took the song to them. Well, they sent it out to all the major companies. They all turned it down. I actually have the turn down letters here. We are looking. Nice. They all turned it down. But so Arnie said, we'll put it out locally. So they had a little label. They had a little local label. They put it out. And the first time they played it it was 94Q radio here. They played it one time and the phones just blew up. And they had to play it again in the same hour, which radio, even today, they wouldn't do that. But back then, especially, they had a very short playlist and you didn't play two songs the same hour. But it was that big of a hit. And it just snowballed. I mean, the record was like just huge in Atlanta suddenly. And so they had pressed up a few records, and they just sold all of them out. Well, at that point, Columbia Records, are you hearing a hum? I apologize if you're.
No.
Okay. There was somebody opening a door or something. So Columbia heard about this, and they said, "Oh, wait a minute, we don't know what this is, but we want to buy it." So they did and put it out. And the interesting thing is the record. This is the end of October, November area. And by the time all that deal was put together and the record was pressed up and sent out and all that, it was going into Christmas. And suddenly the record business, I guess it's still the same now for the record companies, but everything freezes for a couple of weeks on the holidays. So you don't know what's going on. You don't know if the songs, if someone's playing it, not playing it, So we got a little bit, it was a very nervous holiday season. After the first of the year, we came back for a meeting. I can still remember that day. And I remember that Buddy Bowie, who was a partner with Arnie, we're sitting in the office. He goes, "Well, it's over." And we go, "What?" "Yeah, nothing's going on. We haven't heard anything."
And this is in the January of 1982.
Yeah. So we thought it's done and over with. Well, it wasn't done and over with. And what happened is in a few places, especially Florida, somebody decided to play it there, and then they started playing it down there over the holidays. And what happened is a lot of people who were visiting for the holidays in Florida, they come back home to Detroit and Erie, Pennsylvania, and wherever else they all lived up in Cleveland, Ohio, and calling radio stations about this record. And of course, they weren't quite sure what it was, but eventually CBS. Without CBS, the record probably never would have. It would have struggled because you had to have that kind of distribution, a company like that, to get it out that quick, and they did. Anyway, that's what happened. People started requesting it, and then the big change happened when Entertainment Tonight. I don't even know if that show's still on. Entertainment Tonight called, and they wanted to do a story on us, so we did. And back then, of course, television, we didn't have all the cable stuff, and TV was king. And when that interview went out, that's what just pushed it over the edge. And from then on, it was like every major news show, the phone would ring. It could be CBS News, it could be Good Morning America, any of these shows. And we were just caught up in this tsunami, I guess you could say.
Sure.
And that's kind of the background on how all that happened and took off.
And then you guys are selling all these records out. You're appearing everywhere you possibly can. And then March, the fourth week in March of 1982, you guys broke into the top 10. Ended up at number 9 on the charts. And that's actually the reason that I have you here on this episode of the This Week in the 80s show, because we're doing, we being me, are doing the fourth week in March in 1982. And I looked at the chart and I saw number 9, Pac Man Fever. I said, I gotta get Jerry Buckner. That's amazing.
I'm glad to be on the show. I appreciate that. The song actually really should have been higher in Billboard. In fact, there was Cashbox magazine and what's called Record World at the time. They were all 3 national charts. And Cashbox, I think we were 7. And Record World, we were number 3, which is probably more accurate. But that's how the business can work,
of course,
depending on who's doing what. But it was definitely top 10. And it was, I'll never forget the moment we were out with Arnie, our manager, and Arnie had a car phone, which was a big deal in those days.
In 1982, a car phone. That's like James Bond only.
Yeah, well, he was driving a Cadillac. I mean, you know, he was a very successful guy in the record business. And we gone out to eat, and we come back in the car, and he would get numbers every week prior to when they came out, a day or so before. And he's on the phone. He jumps off. He goes, "Guys, we're in the top 10." And we were in the car, and we started yelling and stuff. You know, it was such a cool moment. You know, you spend your life writing songs and doing all this stuff, and then to have that happen, it was just an amazing moment. Yeah, we busted in the top 10. I can remember we're out in California, and we go to the Beverly Hills Hotel, and, you know, everybody's making a big deal. And Gary and I were able to get, they gave us a rental car if we wanted it. So we took off driving around Beverly Hills, and we're driving around, and we got the radio on, and it was, I don't know, Kiss Radio, one of the big stations out there. And on comes our song. And here we are in Beverly Hills, and I looked at Gary, and he looked at me, and Gary says, not bad for a couple of yo-yos from Akron, you know. And we were just laughing. I mean, that this happened and so quick and so huge, you know. And you really, you know, when you're in a situation, at least for us, I don't know about other guys in the business, but, you know, when you have that hit, you don't really, you really don't. It's hard to grasp it all at the moment. You know, I can look back on it now much differently and realize, you know, so much more about it. But at the time, you're just caught up in all this frenzy, you know. But it was just it was a neat feeling, yeah, to go. I remember being at home when I was at home before we went out to California to do all these shows. I remember being there and looking at my dog. I had this dog, a great dog sitting there. And I thought, you know, I'm getting ready to go from being some guy playing in a local band, get to go out in California and be a part of all this stuff, you know. And I thought, this is just weird, you know, but being on the Dick Clark show and meeting Dick Clark, you know, he comes in the room, and, you know, I grew up watching that show, and to be sitting in a room with this guy, and he's in there in a sweatshirt and jeans, and comes in and sits down, sticks his feet up on the table, and, "Hey guys, how you doing?" You know, and we're sitting there, I'm staring at him. I mean, I can't even, you know, this man's a legend, you know, especially to us. And of course, our manager, Arnie, knew Dick and had worked with him on some other things. So they chit-chatted back and forth, and we're just sitting there. And so he starts talking about the show, and he said, "Okay, well, you know, we'll do the show, blah, blah, blah. You'll do Pac Man Fever, and then I'll do a little interview. I'll ask you some stuff," and he asked us a question, and we just sat there staring at him, you know, like, you know, and he goes, "Guys, it's TV. You're going to have to talk, you know," and laughed, you know, kind of put us at ease a little bit. But, it was a terrifying experience. It really was. I mean, you know, you're watching the monitor of the show, and they're doing it, and you go out there and you walk on the set, and here's the you know, the radar record board and all that stuff that you watched on TV, you know, and then we do the song, and he comes out to interview us. And I remember I made his stupid statement. I said something about Perkins Junior High School, where I went to school. I have no idea. I don't remember. I mean, I couldn't remember actually doing the interview, but I remember people kind of laughing and Dick Clark turning his head funny. So after the show, they told me what I'd said. And after the show, some kid comes up, you know, the kids were still there, come up to get autographs. And he goes, "I went to Simon Perkins Junior High School in Akron, Ohio." I said, "Great, you know, that's great." But Dick Clark was so good to us. He was so nice to us. He promoted our second release. He promoted our album on his national radio show. And just an all-around very nice man. He was just a great guy. And it was just a wonderful experience.
What an experience for coming up with the song that you did. And then there was the other interesting, the big interesting experience that we touched on a little bit, but I want to get your official take on it. There was we all 80s kids watched Solid Gold, right? I mean, like legitimately, as we look back, what a ridiculous show. Like what it just beyond reason. The Solid Gold dancers, the lip syncing, Marilyn McCoo, like everything that was involved in that show. Now, when we look at it, you just think, were we really gathered around the TV for that show? But at the time, we look forward to it. It was a big deal because there wasn't MTV. There wasn't the option to see the guys on the radio singing these tunes. So we were tuning in to see it happen. And they also rang up your telephone and got you guys to come out. And you had an interesting idea for some costumes that day, I heard. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, Gary said on the way out before we left, he said, "Hey, let's do when we do these shows, let's look a little bit crazy, you know, and have a little bit of fun with it." I said, "Well, okay." He said, "So let's dress up," or blah, blah. So I come up with this outfit. I thought I always like Groucho Marx, so I thought I'll put a mustache on and wear a lab coat or something. I don't know, just a stupid outfit. And I thought he was going to do something too. So we get out of California, we get over to where they filmed the show. We're in our little dressing rooms. I get ready and step out. I see Gary out of his dressing room. He looks like always, except he had a glasses on with a Pac Man, I think, on the side of the glass. I said, "When are you going to get dressed?" He said, "Oh, I am." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Look at me. I thought we were going to do." And all of a sudden, Buckner and Garcia to the stage, please. Buckner and Garcia, and some associate producer, "Come on, guys, we got to go." So we go out there. Marilyn McCoo standing up there. We walk up on the stage, and she looks at me and she goes, "Who are you supposed to be?" And I go, "The idiot." And so they did it and everything. They taped the show, and of course, I was really mad at him. Fortunately, that was the first show we did before we did any of the other ones, including Dick Clark. So I didn't wear that stupid outfit, but I never forgave him for that. Now, listen, the Solid Gold dancers, that was the best part of the show. They were beautiful.
I was 9-10 years old when it was on, and even I was just like, that's probably something I'm going to like in the future.
Oh my gosh. They had this comedian on there with a dummy or something. You might remember him. I can't remember his name, but he was a comedian, but he came out and he goes, "Hey, let's roll tape." And he rolled some tape across. I'm sure he did that joke for everybody. And he was an idiot, but well, I shouldn't say an idiot. He was doing his thing, but
yeah,
he had a granny puppet or some kind of stuff like that. Anyway, the payoff on the story is once we got back, and it was a week or two later when that show actually aired, and my mom, as soon as it's over, she calls and she goes, "What in the world were you wearing? All my friends are watching the show. You look like an idiot." And I said, "I'm sorry," and blah blah blah. But so that experience for me was not. Also, if you watch the show, if you watch the video of us doing Pac-Man, they did an edit in the song, and what happened is, if you watch, you'll notice that Gary's hat is on halfway through, and then halfway through it's not. And that's because it fell off his head. But when they edited it, it just goes from a hat to no hat. It's pretty funny.
What came next for Jerry Buckner after the Buckner and Garcia Pac Man Fever died down a little bit?
Well, we continued to do stuff recording. We were signed to Columbia for about a year and a half after that, and they didn't want to put anything out. And we did the ET song, and I'm not going to get into all that. It goes on. It's a long story, and it was heartbreaking because we had this. We did it. We saw the Spielberg movie, and we wrote this song, and we thought it was a beautiful ballad, and we thought it was going to really help our career, point us in a new direction. And it just didn't. They didn't promote it because of the Heartlight song with Neil Diamond. Yep. I don't want to get into all that, but that was a big disappointment. So we wanted out of our contract. We were unhappy with them because they weren't, promoting us. And eventually we were able to get out. RCA wanted to sign us, but by the time we were able to get out, it didn't happen. So we continued to produce some other acts and write songs. I had a couple songs recorded. I had Anne Murray recorded a song of mine. It was a top 20 hit. I had a song recorded by a Japanese artist that did really well in Japan. Seiko was her name. She was a big star at the time. I had a song called The Wall. It was about the Vietnam Wall that Bertie Higgins did Key Largo. He recorded that. So I was doing those sort of things. Eventually I got into radio. I loved radio. Actually, that's where I was going to go into originally when I was in Ohio. I was doing both. I had like, do I do music or do I do radio? Because I liked them both. And I ended up doing music, of course. But it came around, and I started doing some characters and comedy here on some local stations, and met another guy. We developed a company of a comedy service that we did all over the country, including ABC Radio. So I did that for a long time. And that kind of led, we did that for, gosh, I don't know, 19 years in radio, working here. We worked in Atlanta radio on one of the top stations. And eventually I got into doing voice work, voice acting, voice work for commercials and stuff like that. And that's, and so that's kind of where things kind of went for me. And now as Pac Man has become so huge over the last few years. The whole 80s situation has become very big. It's become a job again, doing a lot of interviews like these, like with folks like you. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy doing personal appearances. I do a lot of that sort of thing.
Jerry, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I'm going to go crank up some Buckner and Garcia right now, put Froggy's Lament back on my playlist. Okay. And we really do appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us today. Yeah,
we're on Spotify and Pandora and all that. So folks, go check it out if you want to hear the music.
Look for it all, folks. Pac Man Fever. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Man, how cool is that? Jerry Buckner and Garcia stopping by to have a conversation about that amazing song from 1982. For more on Buckner and Garcia, you can go to their website, bucknergarcia.com. No and in that, just bucknergarcia.com. Jerry's got awesome stuff for sale on eBay as well. I'm going to put the links up on the Facebook page and underneath this video as well. Be sure to give him a click and show him some love, because that song, listen, that was everything when I was 8 years old, 9 years old. That's just cool. Thanks so much, Jerry, for stopping by. That's going to do it for me here, folks, for the fourth week in March, 1982. My name is Paul from the 80s, and this is This Week in the 80s. Be sure to like and subscribe and comment and share and do all those cool things that keep me excited about making the next video. And I will see you soon right here on This Week in the 80s.